Little more than 10 years ago at the time of this recording, Father Rolheiser published a blog post on his website. A year or two ago, a Christian friend sent this article to me. I assume her intention was to explain how God could be non-violent, despite the many acts attributed to him in the Bible that I would consider violent. The title of the blog post, which is linked in the description, is The Nonviolence of God. Either way, the article failed to really justify that. To me. To summarize the article, Rolheiser starts by saying that many people throughout history have committed and still commit violence in the name of some god or other, including the Christian God. He says, though, that anyone who attributes these actions to his God is wrong. In fact, he says, and I quote, "Despite a number of texts which, on the surface, seem to indicate that God is ordering violence, but which are really archetypal and anthropomorphic in nature and do not justify that interpretation, we see that, if we read the Bible from beginning to end, a progressive revelation, or at least a progressive realization on our part, of the non-violence of God, a revelation that ends in Jesus, who reveals a God of radical non-violence. Our faulty idea of the God of the Old Testament, who seemingly orders the extermination of whole peoples, is indeed primitive and superstitious, and when placed beside the concept of the Father of Jesus, who sends his Son into the world as a helpless infant and then lets him die helplessly before a mocking crowd." End quote. I find that interesting. The Christian God is one of radical non-violence, he says. Not only that, but he says that this God's ordering of violence is a seeming ordering, and that attributing violence to him is not justified. He doesn't provide an explanation of that. He doesn't say why these seeming violent acts are merely archetypal and anthropomorphic, whatever that even means. He does go on to give the example of the woman caught in adultery, as recorded in John 8, as support for the non-violent God he believes in. But I'd be very interested to see how he explains how this one incident justifies the assertion that attributing violence to God otherwise is not justified. Is someone non-violent because not every act of theirs is violent? Is someone non-violent because he goes back on his own command to kill the supposedly guilty sometimes? I'm perfectly comfortable stating that the accounts in the Bible include some that tell of non-violence and even things that seem anti-violence. But I can point to many accounts that tell of a God of extreme violence. For example, there is Deuteronomy 22, which outlines what should happen if a newlywed bride's virginity is called into question by her groom. If she is found to not have been a virgin at marriage, she is to be stoned to death. It's interesting that there is no such stipulation or care for a bridegroom's virginity. It's just the bodies of women that are to be controlled in this way. I could be wrong, but that's violent to me. And what about Numbers 31, which calls for Israel to take vengeance against the Midianites for leading them into sin, as stated in chapter 25. Chapter 31 says that Israel killed everyone except for the virgin girls. For what? I'm sure you can imagine. I don't understand how that act is not violence. He doesn't just seemingly order extermination in the biblical records. He does order it. If God is so non-violent, why does he not use that all-wise creativity of his to find a way to spare the people living in the land of Canaan that he promises to Israel? He could have made the land barren and uninhabitable somehow, and uninhabited. And then, when Israel is free to enter it, it blooms, showing that this being is so radically non-violent that he goes out of his way to spare even his enemies from dying at the sword of his chosen people. And how about the time God himself burns Sodom and Gomorrah to rubble? Entire cities burned by fire. Imagine the screams. Or what about the time God floods the whole world? Drowning is a painful and frightening way to die. God does that in the Bible with his own divine hand. And arguably, the most violent act the God of the Bible could ever commit is the torturous afterlife. Whether you believe it is eternal suffering or annihilation, the Bible talks about it using horrible language, pain, suffering, all at God's hand. So, if this God exists, I would say that you need to do more than cherry-pick non-violent incidents attributed to him like John 8 to explain others, which seem extremely violent to me. If you can point evidence of his nonviolence with book, chapter, verse, then I'd say you can and should point to book, chapter, verse to explain how you can say that the one who calls on and commits violence is not actually violent. Can you? I'd love to hear it.